dynasty, we mean before Dynasty 1, things were going on back here that are not well documented.
Dynasty 1,
before Dynasty 1, which was before the founding of Kemet as a nation.
In the year?
And this would go back as many years we don't know. Some people say another 5,000 years. Some say another 20,000 years. In fact, the Kemetic historian Mir N. Jehudi, or Manito, suggested that you could go back to 25,000 years at the time that Kemet was ruled by the gods, and then finally by these wise people, and then finally it was organized as one nation in Dynasty 1. So, for example, we know that not 3000 BC, but at 4236, or some people say 4241 BC, the calendar that we use now was already in operation in the Nile Valley. 42,36 or 4241 BC. That calendar was already in place. That is an incredible thing to realize the technology, the mathematics, the number of years of observation that it would take to create that calendar. And that shows that the culture is older than the nation, in other words. So Kemetic culture is pre-dynastic. So the main point of this master key is that we should look in Africa for a long period of development, and we should not begin our analysis with the beginning of the nation of Kemet. We should look for what went before it.
Okay.
Okay, the New York Times had an interesting article which was about the oldest nation in the world, and this is an example of what I was just talking about.
Back to the chart.
Here is Kemet, 3100 BC, beginning, but in the New York Times they tell us there was another nation that is somewhere around 3500 BC, at least 200, maybe 300 or 400 years older than Kemet. There's this nation called Tasseti, and this nation is further up south on the river in an area called Nubia, and that is called the oldest monarchy in the world. And of course they excavated the graves of these kings in Nubia, and these kings in Nubia were said to be tall, black-skinned people. The goddess Isis and her child were already in place at the beginning of Kemet.
Which was, you said,
which was
already
3100 BC.
Dynastic,
and then that's dynastic Kemet. So dynastic Kemet begins after the religion that was the primary religion of Kemet had already been created. So when you go to Tasseti, for example, there is God Horus. This child that's being held by the Virgin Mother is already recorded in Tasseti, south of Kemet, and it's much older than Kemet. So the religion is in place, astronomy is in place, writing, the hieroglyphics or Medu Neter is in place. All of those things are already in place. So the culture is in place before the political organization of Kemet as a nation.
Okay.
Osiris is the god who was associated with Isis, the husband of Isis, symbolically. You see Osiris here with the shepherd's crook and the flail, and he was then the supreme god who was married to Isis. So that becomes the god who is married to a virgin, and they have an offspring, and so we have the first holy family. And so that's an example of a religious story that is similar to the Christian story, but it's 3,000 years older than the Christian story.
And is there a resurrection element here also?
Osiris was resurrected. He was crucified by his brother, cut up into 14 or 28 pieces, depending on the story. His evil brother Set, jealous of him for several things, cut him up, and he was, again, he was risen from the dead to rule over the dead. and that was the story of Osiris.
This is
the earliest story of the resurrection.
Before the Christian.
Again, that goes back about 3,000 years before Christ.
Okay. Master key number 2.
Okay, the second concept that we need to keep in mind, Kemetic culture remained intact through the 7th century A.D. The culture, that's this cultural line that I showed you on the chart. And if we can go back to the chart here.
Okay, let's hold it a minute. Let's let our people get in place.
Okay.
Okay.
So here's the 3,000-year line. It stays the same, the way of life, this religion, this philosophy, up to this point right here. And it's at this point that we get a rather abrupt change in the culture of Kemet. The reason for it is that the conversion of Africans in Kemet to the religion of Islam. This is after the Prophet Muhammad, and then you get at this point a change in belief, but you also get a change in population at this point. You get large numbers of Arabic-speaking people, people with Arabic culture, that come into the Nile Valley and join those that were already there and give to what is now Egypt, rather than Kemet, its essential character, which we see still present in Egypt today.
Okay, let's go on.
Okay, on the third master key, generally in Kemet, if you look at the data, the older things are, the better they are. In other words, the first cultures were more perfect than later cultures. So if I go to this time chart here, and I get back to Dynasty 1, come to Dynasty 3 when they started building pyramids, the earliest pyramids are the best pyramids, and they're still standing.
Okay, let's see if we have an example. Or
the last pyramid, here's an example of the early pyramid, the step pyramid. That's the first pyramid. That pyramid is still standing. It was not the most perfect pyramid. The most perfect pyramid would be the Great Pyramid. And the Great Pyramid is that one in the far part of the slide. And that is the Pyramid of Giza. But we see two other pyramids with it. Now, these are some of the best formed pyramids. These pyramids would be around 2500 BC. After this, there were about another 75 or so pyramids, and they began to deteriorate in quality. So that's one example of older being better.
Well, we have this graphic up there, the pyramid.
Right.
How tall is that?
That pyramid, the Great Pyramid, is about 43 stories tall.
Built when?
Built, the Great Pyramid was built around 25, a little longer than 2500 BC.
Okay.
If we look again at older is better, if we look at the text, this is the text of the oldest Bible in the world, written on the walls of the tomb of Unas. And if you read what becomes from this and other tombs, a book called the Book of the Dead, its formal name is the Per Imhru, or the Book of Coming Forth from Darkness into Light, then you'll see that, for example, you see no pornography there. You see, in fact, you don't even see pictures there. You see pure text. And if you go back, the text was pure, not only in written form, but in symbolic form. It was better looking text. It looked better as it was carved into the walls and colored. And some of those colors are still there.
Okay.
And in addition to looking better, the ideas were less contaminated with superstition and what have you.
Okay.
We see, for example, older is better here again in terms of the temple at Saqqara. This is the funerary temple at Saqqara of King Zoser that was done approximately 2700 BC. And we see here also the antecedents of Greek architecture. If you see the columns here, these columns dating now from 2700 BC compared to the Parthenon on the Acropolis, which would not appear until around 500 BC. So here we have something more than 2,000 years older than that building that we call the Parthenon in Greece, and it's already present in the architecture.
So when we see columns, we're seeing African.
We're seeing African columns. They're copies of African architecture.
Okay.
The fourth master key is that you always have to remember when looking at any information from Kemet that their orientation was up south.
Are you going to be using the map for this?
We can show you
Okay,
on the map
let our folks get in place. Okay, go ahead.
that that this river